The two sides, in a bid to compensate Australian media companies for the use of their news content, couldn't be much further apart.
It would give us no real choice but to stop making Google search available in Australia.
Australia makes our rules for things you can do in Australia. That's done in our parliament, it's done by our government, and that's how things work here in Australia. And people who want to work with that in Australia, you're very welcome. But we don't respond to threats.
An 18-month investigation by Australia's competition regulator concluded that the tech giants held too much market power in the media industry.
It found that there was a substantial bargaining power imbalance when it came to the ability of news producers to negotiate with Google and Facebook on the use of their content.
The competition regulator also found that Australia's media landscape is shrinking because of falling advertising revenue. The solution is legislation that would force the platforms to pay local media companies for their content. Google and Facebook would have to negotiate a payment with individual media outlets.
It's got the support of all the major parties. It's endorsed by all the major news organisations. This is good policy to regulate big tech, and big tech needs to recognise that when they operate in a democracy, the laws of the land should apply.
But critics contend the new law is a way of propping up a struggling media industry, and the tech giants argue that news media companies already receive a benefit from appearing in Google searches and in the referral traffic from Facebook.
The big uncertainty, though, is what's the value of that benefit? How do you actually calculate, say, the benefit that platforms provide to news producers in contrast to the benefit that news producers provide to digital platforms?
There's been a lot of discussion of different ways of regulating these social media giants.
University of South Australia lecturer Damien Spry believes the legislation isn't fair to tech companies, in part because there's no accurate and universal way to determine the value of content produced by news media companies.
So they're getting paid to produce something that may or may not have value.
Experts point out that from Google and Facebook's perspective, Australia is not the most important, nor is it the most profitable market around the globe. And it is certainly not one, they say, that the tech giants can't afford to live without. And they can't afford to agree on a law that would set a precedent, allowing other countries to create similar legislation.
I don't see Google or Facebook agreeing to participate in this, and they can't be compelled to if they decide to leave.
Spry also says there's no guarantee that a compensation scheme for news media companies will guarantee better journalism, especially when there's a temptation to simply produce more content to bring in more revenue. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Melbourne.